It all began on a cold, unforgiving night in a small, quiet town, a place where trust in the law runs deep and assumptions can make or break a life. But what happens when the ones sworn to uphold justice decide to turn their gaze on the most vulnerable? This is the story of a boy without a home, without a family, and some thought, without a chance. A boy who found himself at the center of a storm he never saw coming. A shocking accusation, a sheriff determined to close the case, and a courtroom showdown no one could have predicted. He was just a teenager, fighting not just for his innocence, but for his very survival. And yet, in the face of impossible odds, this boy, armed with nothing but the truth, would stand up to power and unravel a web of lies so twisted it left an entire courtroom in stunned silence. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about resilience, about fighting for the truth when the world turns its back on you. And in the end, it's a story that proves how justice can triumph, even when the deck is stacked against you. Stay with us as we uncover the harrowing tale of a homeless boy accused of a crime he didn't commit, and the courtroom shocker that changed everything. This is a fight for justice. This is the story you won't forget. He was just 16 years old, a boy caught in the merciless grip of a life he never chose. His name was Liam. To most, he was invisible, just another face in the shadows of a small, tight-knit town. But beneath the dirt-streaked clothes and the tired eyes was a young soul with dreams, hopes, and a kindness that defied the hand he'd been dealt. Liam's story began when his world fell apart. A family shattered by tragedy, a home lost to circumstances beyond his control. And just like that, he was thrust onto the streets, left to fend for himself in a world that seemed determined to forget him. Every day was a battle, finding food, seeking shelter, and dodging the cold stares of those who looked right through him. In a town where everyone knew everyone, Liam was an outsider. His presence was tolerated at best, resented at worst. But despite it all, Liam held on to something rare, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. He would help strangers carry their groceries, pick up litter in the park, and even share what little he had with those who needed it more. He didn't beg for pity, only for a chance to prove he was more than the labels placed on him. And yet, in this town with its pristine streets and proud community, there was an undercurrent, a divide between those who had power and those who didn't. The sheriff was at the center of it all, a man known for his strict demeanor and swift judgments. In his eyes, Liam wasn't a boy to be understood. He was a problem to be solved. Little did Liam know his struggles were only beginning. His fight for survival was about to collide with forces far greater than he could imagine. And soon, the boy who asked for nothing would be thrust into a battle for everything. It started with a crime, a break-in at a small convenience store on the outskirts of town. The thief had taken cash from the register and a few supplies, leaving shattered glass and fear in their wake. The sheriff was quick to act, determined to restore order and find a culprit. But in his haste, he didn't seek justice. He sought a scapegoat. And there was Liam, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had been seen near the store earlier that evening, rummaging through a trash bin for food. It wasn't unusual. Liam often lingered in places others avoided, always trying to stay unnoticed. But this time, his presence wasn't ignored. It was remembered. When the sheriff questioned witnesses, the answers were vague yet damning. A store clerk said they might have seen someone matching Liam's description. A passerby claimed they thought they saw him running nearby. No hard evidence, no solid proof. Just whispers and assumptions that quickly solidified into accusations. The sheriff was certain he had his suspect. Why? Maybe it was the pressure of a town demanding quick results. Maybe it was his own biases against a homeless boy who didn't fit into the town's image of respectability. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something deeper, a need to assert control, to send a message that no one, not even a powerless boy, could slip through his grasp. Liam was arrested in broad daylight, dragged from the park where he often rested. Onlookers watched as the sheriff's men placed him in handcuffs. Some muttered in agreement, believing the boy was guilty before hearing a single fact. Others turned away, unwilling to get involved. In the interrogation room, the sheriff pressed Liam relentlessly. "Just admit it," he said. Make this easier on yourself. But Liam, trembling and confused, insisted on his innocence. His voice wavered, but his words didn't change. I didn't do it. I wasn't there. As the case unfolded, the sheriff presented his so-called evidence. A witness who couldn't be sure. A footprint that vaguely matched, and yet these flimsy threads were enough to weave a narrative. One that painted Liam as a desperate thief willing to cross the line. But the truth was far from what the sheriff wanted the town to believe. And soon the cracks in his story would begin to show. Because in his rush to accuse, the sheriff overlooked one crucial detail. A detail that would unravel his case and expose the truth in the most dramatic way imaginable. The arrest came swiftly, without warning. Liam was sitting on a park bench, clutching a worn backpack that held everything he owned. The day had been like any other, cold, lonely, and uneventful. But then the sheriff's patrol car pulled up, and everything changed. Two deputies approached him, their faces hard and unyielding. "You're coming with us," one of them said. Liam froze, his mind racing. "What did I do?" he asked, his voice trembling. But his question was met with silence as they grabbed him by the arm and hauled him to his feet. Onlookers gathered, whispering among themselves. Some looked on with pity, others with suspicion. Liam pleaded, "I didn't do anything. Please, you have the wrong person." But his words fell on deaf ears. To the deputies, his protests were nothing more than noise. He was shoved into the back of the patrol car, the door slamming shut like the toll of a judge's gavel. As they drove him to the station, Liam's mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What had he been accused of? Why wouldn't they tell him? The interrogation room was small and cold, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Liam sat alone at the table, his hands trembling as the sheriff entered the room. The man's presence was overpowering, his voice low and deliberate. "We know you did it, Liam," he said, leaning in. "Just confess, and maybe we'll go easy on you." Liam shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "I didn't do anything," he whispered. But the sheriff wasn't interested in his denials. The questions came fast, each one more pointed than the last. "Where were you that night? Why were you near the store? What did you do with the money?" Liam struggled to answer, his voice breaking under the weight of the accusations. He tried to explain that he'd been looking for food, that he hadn't even entered the store. But the sheriff's tone grew sharper, more insistent. "Stop lying, boy. We have witnesses." Hours passed, and Liam's exhaustion began to show. His words became quieter, his defenses weaker. But through it all, he never wavered from the truth. "I didn't do it." Yet there was no lawyer, no advocate to stand by his side. The sheriff didn't offer one, and Liam didn't know enough to ask. It was just him against a man determined to break him. A man who saw Liam not as a boy, but as an easy target. But even in that small, cold room, a spark of hope remained. Because while the sheriff believed he had all the answers, the truth was beginning to unravel. One misstep, one overlooked detail at a time. And when the moment came, it would turn this case upside down. The courtroom was packed. Rows of townsfolk filled the benches, their faces a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and anticipation. At the center of it all sat Liam, a boy dwarfed by the towering formality of the court. His clothes were simple, his hands clenched tightly in his lap, but his eyes, those betrayed a blend of fear and quiet defiance. He was here to prove the truth, against odds that seemed insurmountable. The prosecution wasted no time, their confidence unshaken. The sheriff himself took the stand, his uniform crisp, his demeanor unyielding. His voice was steady, dripping with certainty as he laid out his case. "The evidence is clear," he declared. "Liam was seen near the store. Witnesses placed him at the scene. There's no doubt in my mind. He's guilty." The crowd murmured, the weight of the sheriff's words rippling through the room. For many, his authority was unassailable. But the defense wasn't finished. Liam's lawyer, a seasoned but understated figure, rose to cross-examine the sheriff. "You said witnesses placed Liam at the scene. he began, his tone measured. Can you confirm they saw him inside the store? The sheriff hesitated, a moment so brief it could have gone unnoticed. No, he admitted finally, but he was nearby. The defense pressed on. Witness after witness took the stand, each recounting their vague memories of that night. I think it was him, one said. It looked like him, said another. But under scrutiny, their statements began to crumble. Times didn't align. Details were inconsistent. The cracks in the prosecution's case were becoming harder to ignore. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Liam's turn to speak. He stood slowly, his slight frame seeming even smaller in the imposing courtroom. But when he spoke, his voice was clear, filled with a raw honesty that silenced the room. I wasn't in the store, he said. I was looking for food in the trash outside. I didn't steal anything, I swear. His words hung in the air, each one a plea not just for innocence but for understanding. He recounted his life on the streets, the nights spent cold and hungry, the fear of being judged without a chance to explain. And as he spoke, the courtroom began to shift. Doubt seeped into the air, replacing the certainty that had once filled it. But then came the moment that changed everything. A piece of evidence no one saw coming. The defense attorney held up a small, grainy video file. This, he said, his voice firm, is footage from a security camera across the street. The video played, the courtroom silent. On the screen, a figure could be seen, similar in build to Liam but with one crucial difference. The thief was wearing a jacket Liam didn't own. Gasps echoed through the room. The prosecution scrambled, their case unraveling before their eyes. And then, the final blow, a new witness stepped forward, someone who had been hesitant to speak until now. They testified that Liam was nowhere near the store at the time of the crime. He had been helping them carry supplies, a quiet act of kindness that proved his innocence. The courtroom erupted, shock, outrage, and for some, relief. The sheriff sat in stunned silence, his authority shaken. And Liam? He sat quietly, tears streaming down his face as the judge delivered the verdict. Not guilty. In that moment, justice had prevailed. But it wasn't just a victory for Liam. It was a reminder to everyone in that room and everyone watching that the truth has a way of rising, even when buried beneath doubt and prejudice. The gavel fell and the courtroom held its breath. The judge's voice rang out, "Not guilty." In that moment, the weight of weeks of accusations, fear, and uncertainty lifted from Liam's shoulders. He was free. The boy who had been cast aside, labeled a criminal without cause, had triumphed over a system that tried to break him. But the story didn't end there. For the sheriff, the consequences were swift and unforgiving. Public outcry over the mishandling of the case spread through the town like wildfire. Questions arose. Why had he rushed to judgment? Why hadn't he investigated more thoroughly? Pressure mounted, and eventually the sheriff was forced to step down, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. As for Liam, his life was forever changed. The town that once turned its back on him began to see him in a new light. Not as a nameless boy on the streets, but as a symbol of resilience and courage. Community members rallied around him, offering support in ways he'd never known. Someone gave him a job, another a place to stay. Slowly, Liam began to rebuild the life that had been stolen from him. But Liam didn't stop there. He took his experience, the pain, the injustice, and turned it into a mission. He became a voice for those like him. The forgotten, the marginalized, the falsely accused. Through speaking engagements and advocacy work, he shone a light on the flaws in a system that too often judged based on appearances rather than truth. This case exposed more than the sheriff's mistakes. It revealed a deeper problem, a system that was quick to criminalize the vulnerable, slow to admit its faults, and reluctant to change. Liam's story became a rallying cry, a reminder that justice isn't just about laws and verdicts. It's about fairness, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. In the end, Liam's journey wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about reclaiming his dignity, finding his place in a world that had tried to cast him aside, and proving to everyone that even the smallest voice can echo loudly in the halls of justice. His story will not be forgotten. It's a testament to the power of truth and the unyielding spirit of a boy who refused to give up, no matter how great the odds against him. Liam's story is more than just a courtroom drama. It's a wake-up call, a stark reminder of what happens when prejudice overshadows truth, when power goes unchecked, and when those without a voice are left to fend for themselves in a system designed to work against them. This case wasn't just about proving one boy's innocence. It was about exposing the cracks in a justice system that too often assumes, judges, and condemns without ever seeking to understand. It was about shedding light on the struggles of the homeless, the unseen and unheard, who are too easily discarded by a world that should protect them. But Liam's story is also one of hope. It's proof that even when the odds are stacked against you, the truth can prevail. It's a testament to the power of resilience, of standing tall in the face of adversity, and of fighting back when the world tries to silence you. And let this be a lesson for all of us, to look beyond the surface, to question what we're told, and to stand up for what's right, even when it's not easy. Because justice isn't just about laws or verdicts, it's about humanity. So now the question is yours to answer. What will you do with this story? Will you let it inspire you to see the unseen? To speak up when others are silenced? To fight for those who cannot fight for themselves? This story is a reminder of how one voice, no matter how small, can stand up against injustice and change everything. If this message moved you, don't let it stop here. Share this story. Start the conversation, because together we can create a world where justice isn't just a word, it's a reality.